Hi, I'm Jack Messer, the Director of Planning for the City of Overland Park. You are tuning in to a video series that has been prepared in advance of the city's upcoming comprehensive planning process in 2022. The city has engaged with speakers to present trends and think about how cities, and particularly a suburban city like Overland Park, might think ahead about its future. We want this information to help motivate you to participate in the planning of your city, this city's future. We hope you find this information useful. We have also offered an opportunity for you to react to these thoughts and hope you will provide feedback in the online survey offered at the end of the video. This is our third Planning the Plan session. This session is titled The Future of Transportation and Mobility. Transportation is such a critical part of our everyday life. Thinking about how we incorporate the needs of moving people around a city of 200,000 people in the variety of ways that people like to move about is a critical component of our plan. In this video, Jason provides some thoughts about all the various aspects of planning, building, and managing a transportation system. Jason Schrieber is a senior principal with Stantec. Jason is a transportation planner and designer focused on the public realm and the impacts it has on producing safe, efficient, and healthy communities. For over 25 years, he has helped hundreds of cities, institutions, and developers understand how individual travel behaviors are influenced by physical and economic attributes, resulting in solutions that elevate the importance of smarter and shared mobility to reduce costs and provide for alternative forms of transportation, reveal the true costs of parking, and promote safer places for travelers of all backgrounds and abilities through balanced, user-based analytical tools. Working across all forms of transportation, Jason has shown places from Boston to Abu Dhabi how to manage parking in difficult shared environments, how to develop demand management programs that get people to choose transit, walking, and biking, and how to smartly design solutions that range from the site to corridor to citywide and regional levels, always aiming to use transportation investments and mobility strategies wisely. So watch our video, and afterward, please take time to give us feedback on what you learned.
So much like the weather, change in transportation is inevitable. Wait a minute and you'll get a new technology or a new trend. Back when I started my career in the early 90s, it was about driving and suburban sprawl and congestion. Transit ridership was down. And now suddenly, 25 years later, every one of those trends has changed. About 15 years ago, urban living and urban transportation suddenly became this new and growing thing, and everybody was returning to the city. And here we are today with urban growth and property values as high as the suburbs have ever been, even in a pandemic. About, say, 10 years ago, suddenly how people travel started to change a lot. We started to see a shift to biking and other modes, and eventually things like Uber and rideshare and micromobility came on the scene. That's a lot of rapid change. But just in the last 5 years, now we have technology making that suddenly simpler. We can get around by using a smartphone. We have artificial intelligence controlling robotic cars. And very soon, we're going to have people flying in robotic taxis. This is stuff that is accelerating at a great pace, but there's something wonderful about change, is that we, with all the knowledge we've been able to obtain, have a great way to control it, to make it work better for communities, to make it work better for individuals, and to, most importantly, to make it be more cost-effective, efficient, and smart. So I think of change over the last, say, 10 years, and especially over the next 10 years, which is what we need to be thinking about, in three ways. Things have changed about when people want to travel. Things have changed about how they want to travel. And most importantly, things have changed about where they want to travel. So first of all, when we want to travel has been changing for actually quite some time, but suddenly during the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody knew what it was like to work from home. And that's really the key to when we want to travel. There's no longer the 9 to 5 standard commute out there for such a large proportion of people. Now, maybe half of all jobs still need to be in person, but even those have some element of being able to telecommute now and then. And so before COVID-19, we had a 10-year rise where up to about 20% of all work-related travel could be done work from home, and was. People were spending almost 2 days a week working from home. Now, during COVID-19, boom, that suddenly went up to 80%, and folks were nearly 100% at home, and many of you may still be. By the end of 2020, that had started to decline down to only about half. It's expected that in the long term, we're still going to see at least 35% of all trips being work from home, because look at all the technologies we have around us. We can simulate our office in front of us. We can be able to plan trips and plan communications much more effectively at more convenient times. So we don't actually have to travel at commute hours, or we can go in for just a few hours. It's expected that up to 2.5 days a week are gonna be spent working from home in aggregate. And so that's pretty important, because what has happened as a result of all this work from home? We've been able to decompress the peak hours by choosing when we want to go in. So an old adage in transportation is that if you are able to remove 10% of the traffic from any congested roadway, any congested intersection, you can make it go from something really bad, an F grade, to at least a D grade. And so what that means is if we're able to take out 10, 20, or 35% of people working from home from the traffic stream, that can clear up roadways. And that creates space, actually, for other modes of transportation. And that's the other thing I want to talk about, which is how we travel. So a really interesting change in how we travel began about 15 years ago. In 2008, the regular increase of vehicle miles traveled, how much we all drove in America, stopped. It started to plateau and even decline, even as the population continued to grow. This was totally bucking the trend of decades. Well, to some degree, yes, there was a generational change of people who wanted to maybe ride transit a little bit more, ride their bikes a little bit more, and rates of transit and biking went up. But another key thing happened. In 2007, the Apple iPhone was introduced, and that suddenly changed how we looked at transportation. We could access, with all sorts of different smartphones from different manufacturers, all sorts of opportunities right at our fingertips. Quickly, Uber became an opportunity to share rides. That was followed not too long by Lyft. And then along came new technologies with the power of electrification and batteries, enabling us to use electric scooters. Bird came around, and suddenly thousands of trips a day were being made by scooters. Now there's electric bicycles and new forms of mobility that have evolved really rapidly in the last few years. And finally, we now have automation. There's pilots of automated shuttles running on the roads of America today, with automated cars coming soon and regular to your backyard. The amount of miles that each and every one of us travel as a result declined due to all these technologies, and it's expected that that decline will continue. What does that mean? More space on the roads for everything else. We don't need to build as many roads. We need to think about actually repurposing roads, like many places have when there's spare capacity, to accommodate more and more of these other modes, because riding a bike is far more efficient than sitting in a large car. Sitting on a transit vehicle is even more efficient than that. And it's those types of efficiencies that can really reap benefits for our communities, because we can reclaim space, we can make things be more efficient, and it's all because of how we travel, which is shared and more efficient and becoming more and more electrified and driven by high technology. So I'm not worried about robot cars suddenly taking over the world and driving us absolutely everywhere. That is not going to happen anytime soon, decades from now. But we do need to plan for high technology. There's examples of this happening in all sorts of communities across America. We've got suburban developments that are using automated taxis. We have microtransit vehicles operating in cities of all sizes across America. And we're starting to see experiments with transit being automated, which will make that be 24 hours and more frequent, given all the labor costs with transit. So there's some excellent opportunities if we plan right for high technology. But still, the more important thing that we can be doing to get our communities embracing change better is thinking about where people really want to travel. So the where of transportation has a lot to do with how we get around our daily lives. What are the land uses in our community? And most importantly, how are they mixed together and how close are they? So I love this example. So let's say I live in a typical suburban environment, okay? And in that environment, every use is sort of scattered along an arterial roadway. So on an average day, let's say I drive in and there's a parking lot available for me at every location, which is what we have in most places. I can go in and drop off my daughter at school. I can then drive over to work for the day. After work, I can run over, pick her up at school, drop her off at soccer practice. Then I shoot over, maybe pick up some dinner for the evening, come back, pick her up from soccer, and then I drive home. The problem is, I needed to use a lot of parking spaces for that, and I went out on the roadway and created all sorts of turning movements on that roadway with every trip. So what we're trying to push for more and more, and why we're seeing an urban renaissance, has a lot to do with basic efficiency. If you look at a mixed-use downtown, in many places, not only historic downtowns, but the new ones that are being created, you'll get more or less a grid of streets, hopefully not just an arterial, and you'll get all those same uses, but they're mixed together. And their parking is mixed together, and they don't need as much of it because I can drive in and park once. I can walk to work while my daughter walks to school. She can walk herself over to soccer practice. I can walk through the shopping center on the way to the car, and she'll meet me back there after soccer practice, and we can drive home. And what did we do? We only made 2 turning movements on that arterial. And what does that mean? We took up half the needed parking, half of the land area that was needed for all of that. We reduced the trips on that arterial all the way down to just a quarter of what we would have otherwise made, and we only made 1/6 of those turning movements. Those turning movements are what causes congestion. And of course, we reduced the vehicle miles of travel, and that is why we've been seeing lower vehicle miles of travel in the United States. It isn't just other modes. We did all of what I just said by driving, and then, walking to something that was nearby. And that's truly the key here, is where we are going. We are walking to places that are nearby. If I were to think about many downtowns today, walking to places that are nearby is not always the easiest and safest thing to do. Sometimes the roads are very wide, sometimes it feels very threatening, there's a lot of cars traveling by, sometimes it's all just many lanes of one-way travel. So what started to happen in our downtowns is we've seen the efficiencies of being able to incorporate other modes, but we've also recognized the value of making it safer for basic walking across the street. We put in curb extensions, we put in better crosswalks, we sometimes convert one-ways to two-ways. We'll add bike lanes to be able to add bike capacity, but also maybe make it easier to cross the street. Another key tool is on-street parking gets inserted in many places in replacement of travel lanes. Well, that can be a great way for me to be able to park once and go visit a few businesses without needing a lot of parking. But what's also going to happen about the where of where we want to go is that the front door places of our downtowns are going to transform. It is far more efficient for us to be able to use our curbs, not to actually store a parked car, but to use it for turnover of all sorts of other modes of transportation. We get many, many more trips in and out of businesses by biking, by transit, and just simply by walking. And that is really where the transformation of our downtowns and oftentimes our economies are. Customers are in footfalls, not in closing car doors. And it's that kind of appreciation for what downtowns are that many businesses, many retailers, and many developers are suddenly seeing. And it's something that people want. They're buying this, they're moving into these environments, and it's very productive, but most importantly, it produces dramatically less traffic. It's far more efficient use, and the key thing here is it requires less parking. Why is less parking important? Parking, believe it or not, is expensive. A surface space is at least $5,000 to construct. A garage space at least $25,000. You go underground, it's at least $50,000, and then you have to maintain it. And anything that's structured is expensive. We rarely see the cost of that parking passed on to those of us who park. In America, there's something like 6 parking spaces for every person, and 96% of all parking is free. When it's $25,000 a space, somewhere the cost of parking is absorbed, and it's been absorbed for years in the cost of buildings, homes, land, development. When you're starting to see mixed-use environments where there's less need for parking and much easier to walk between uses instead, suddenly you're seeing savings and efficiencies that can be passed on to individuals, affordable housing, cheaper rents for retailers. Mom and pop stores take advantage of these things. We can start to see downtown environments and exurban environments that have walkable nodes become much better and more vital places when we deprioritize having a lot of parking and putting it out front and think about sharing it as a resource. And let me tell you about sharing. Shared parking is a super way of approaching parking systems, parking rules, policies, and zoning. It's an excellent opportunity for us to be able to make 2 places who have different demands at different times of the day not need all of their own parking, but share the same supply in a balance. And that's truly a huge part of sharing. Shared transportation, as I've already said, rideshare becoming Uber Pool and Lyft Line. Transit becoming something that is sleek, fun, affordable, and more frequent through automation. A bicycle that's a shared ride, or an e-scooter that I can hop off of and leave behind and dial up another one on my app. Sharing has ultimately proven itself to be one of the more effective and efficient ways for future of mobility to carry our communities into a smarter and safer future. And that's the final point that I really think everybody needs to understand about all this change that's been happening over the last 15 years. We, in our communities all across America, we have an opportunity to work together more collaboratively and smarter about transportation. It isn't about my car and my parking space. Yes, the car will always be a wonderful spot, but you don't want to sit in your car all day long. It's about where you're going. And if where you're going is easy to get to and it's safe, that is really, really valuable. If where you're going you can get to by other means that are healthy and safe, but are protected and accommodated and not just always the car, well, that frees up all sorts of space for other more important things. And when we look at our communities and how they're going to be made in the future, it's all about those more important things. Freeing up space for the public realm, freeing up space for more affordable housing, freeing up space for better places, open spaces. That's where the future of development in our communities is going, and it can be born thanks to high technologies and efficiencies in transportation. And I'm very excited about the future of transportation. Obviously, I can't stop talking about it.
For more information about this speaker series, including past sessions, and to keep up with the latest, visit opkansas.org/compplan.